entirely that the government is doing this simply for wedge politics issues, simply to draw a wedge which is not there on the issue of the gun registry. And when you see words like common sense describing the bill, you know the jig is up, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had the honour to speak on behalf of our government at the Ukrainian National Federation Ottawa-Gatineau Group. The member from Ottawa Centre was also a guest speaker. It was emotional to see Canadians from all across this country working towards assisting the Ukrainian people to maintain their independence and their democratic rights. Mr. Speaker, Canada must continue to aid and assist the Ukrainian people to stop the Putin aggression. And in closing, I'd like to thank the honourable member from Ottawa Centre for most graciously giving me a ride back to the Hill. Thank you.
The honourable member for Victoria.
I rise today to observe World No Tobacco Day. Started by the World Health Organization, it's another reminder of the dangers of smoking and the urgent need to continue to update our laws to protect the public, to encourage quitting, and to never let up on our efforts to stop children from starting to smoke in the first place. This year's theme is stopping the illicit trade in tobacco, which robs governments all over the world of the revenues needed to deal with this health epidemic. Tobacco-related illnesses are among the world's greatest health threats. Right here in Canada, smoking continues to be responsible for 30% of all cancer deaths. We must be vigilant in updating tobacco control strategies to combat an industry that targets young people and uses deceptive practices to increase profits. We have to ensure our healthcare system supports people in quitting. In closing, I would like to thank the Canadian Cancer Society, which has been relentless in pushing for public policy changes to stop smoking and to help Canadians lead healthier lives.
The honourable member for Prince George, Peace River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pleased today to rise and to congratulate the North Peace Historical Society as they celebrate the grand opening of the newly renovated Fort St. John North Peace Museum. The North Peace Historical Society and the Fort St. John North Peace Museum play a vital role in preserving and sharing our region's unique history, and these renovations will now allow even more families and seniors to come and explore this important community resource. Just last week, the North Peace Historical Society hosted a night at the museum where local volunteers like Larry Evans, Evelyn Syme, Mario Wheat dressed up as some of our region's more prominent historical figures to share their stories and interact with those in attendance. I want to also send my best wishes to Museum Manager and Curator Heather Schaublom, North Peace Historical Society President Evelyn Syme, and all of the museum's volunteers, including my mom and daughter Bobby, as they celebrate the grand opening of the newly renovated museum. Congratulations.
The honourable member for Mount Royal.
Mr. Speaker, the Burundi diaspora in Canada, whose members are present in the gallery, is alarmed by the political and humanitarian crisis facing Burundi. Since President Nkurunziza had declared his intention to seek a third mandate in defiance of the Constitution, the country has seen demonstrations, a violent campaign by the police and militia. Members of the opposition as well as rights advocates were targeted, including journalists, members of the media, and a leader of the opposition was assassinated last Saturday. There are some 100,000 refugees. Many are injured. Scores have been killed. Several countries, like France, among others, have blocked assistance to Burundi and are calling for the elections to be postponed. Canada should speed up the processing of family reunification and immigration and suspend removals to Burundi. Join the international community to ensure that the human rights of all Burundis are respected.
The honourable member for Mississauga South.
Mr. Speaker, Speaker, allow me to take this opportunity to tell you about a small but important measure taken in my riding of Mississauga South recently, one that will affect many of my older constituents and one that will improve their quality of life in a meaningful way. Last week at Port Credit Legion Branch 82, I was joined by the Leader of the Government in the House to bring word that this Conservative government, through the Enabling Accessibility Fund, would help the Legion make its beautiful waterfront property on the Credit River more accessible for those in wheelchairs and those who need to get extra help getting into this great place where friends and veterans, young and old, gather to join in camaraderie, friendship, and tell many stories, sometimes even over a beverage or two. Even better, Mr. Speaker, through the New Horizons program, funds will also be contributed toward a new fryer and ventilation system so that the famous Friday night fish fries can be held once again. Mr. Speaker, the Legion's a great Canadian place, and I will be delighted as an associate member and as the Member of Parliament to take part in a few Friday night fish fries this summer. Thank you.
The honourable member for Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, it's great sadness that I rise to pay tribute to George Braden, the first elected Premier of the Northwest Territories, who passed away Monday. Born in Saskatchewan in 1949, he and his family moved to the NWT in 1964. From 1977 to 79, George was an advisor of the Honourable Bud Drury, the Prime Minister's Special Representative for Constitutional Development in the Northwest Territories. In 1979, he was elected to the 9th Legislative Assembly. The MLAs voted George the first leader of the elected members of Cabinet, a position has become known as Premier. He served as leader until 1983. During his time in government, George promoted a new recognition of the Northwest Territories at the national level and a more prominent role in Confederation, including working to win a seat for the NWT at the First Ministers' Conferences. George led the NWT's lobbying for Aboriginal rights to be included in Section 35 of the Constitution. George's strong support for an independent NWT was a major influence in my political career. He was the first of the new northern politicians to speak up for public government. My deepest sympathies go to his wife, Lise, and the Braden family. George will be sorely missed.
The honourable member for Edmonton East.
Mr. Speaker, when dawn broke 71 years ago, the enemy's stark view from their fortifications over the beaches of Normandy was a silhouette of war painted across the horizon. The Allied invasion of Europe had begun. Among the vast Allied fleet poised to attack was a young teenage seaman of the Royal Canadian Navy serving on the HMCS Prince Henry, a landing craft carrier. Amidst bursting enemy shells and clouds of smokes from the ship's guns, Marty Jones provided artillery cover for the landing crafts laden with soldiers of the Regina Rifles and the Canadian Scottish Regiment heading to Juno Beach. Since the war, Marty has worked for 29 years for CMHC in Edmonton, retiring in 1985. He distinguished himself further and became the recipient of the Alberta Centennial, the Queen's Gold, the Queen's Diamond Jubilee medals. Marty, with his wife Pauline, family and friends, are all celebrating life's blessings and Marty's 90th birthday this Saturday. Happy birthday, Marty. Good health and God bless you.
The honourable member for Brampton Springdale.
Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate Manan Gupta and Minkle Mittal on hosting the 7th annual Today Truck Show job fair in Brampton Soccer Centre. The trucking extravaganza included plenty of activities, including an indoor trade show, job fair for truck drivers, MTO road safety awareness, driving simulator, and family entertainment. The truck show was managed and hosted by the Road Today Media Group, who have served Canada's trucking industry for many years. This excellent organization puts a special emphasis on new Canadians that want to have a successful career in the trucking industry. I want to thank the organizers for making this event such a resounding success and hosting excellent day for families and tradespeople in our community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles.
Last night, I had the pleasure of attending the gala organized by the Collectif des Entreprises d'Insertion du Québec. It was an opportunity to underscore the 20 years of history, passion, and assistance, because it was in 1995 that this group came together. These companies make it possible to lift thousands of people out of poverty. The Quebec economy benefits from it, but the pride of all those who are able to re-enter the workforce is priceless. On behalf of the NDP and the team, I would like to congratulate everyone who's part of the collective. A special mention as well for the Grenier Populaire in Saint-Eustache. I want to thank the members of the board, Yves Desforges, Raymond Lucier, Lise Savard, as well as all the participants who do their utmost for the success of employees. The Grenier Populaire has an incalculable impact on young people and members in the region, including citizens of Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Together we can work hard to build better communities.
The honourable member for Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, the leader of the Liberal Party has just announced a major plank in their platform. He said, and I quote, "We're looking at an expansion of the Canada Pension Plan and a mandatory expansion of the CPP of the type that his friend Kathleen Wynne has put forward in Ontario. He is promising, Mr. Speaker, to impose a payroll tax hike that would cost someone earning $60,000 over $1,000 out of their take-home pay. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal leader promises to raise taxes on the middle class and kill jobs. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we cut taxes and we create jobs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The
honourable member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Next week, from June 5th to June 7th, Friday to Sunday, Vaudreuil-Dorion will celebrate the 23rd edition of the Seigneurial, a historically themed festival which celebrates New France, includes activities for the entire family, traditional music, workshops, period games for children, and interactive displays. This year is also the 350th anniversary of the arrival of the Carignan-Salière Regiment in New France. And for me, this event isn't simply a historic fact, it's also the anniversary of the arrival of my family in New France. My ancestor, Jean Desforges, also known as Saint-Maurice, was part of that regiment, and I'm very proud of my family heritage. Vaudreuil-Soulanges is a meeting place for our founding peoples, a place to trade for cultural exchanges and to dream about the country that would become Canada. I invite all of my fellow citizens to attend Les Seigneuriales to celebrate Canada in the best part of the country, in Vaudreuil-Soulanges.
The honourable member for Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents in Richmond Hill know that only this Conservative government will help families save more of their own money for their priorities.
True enough.
This week, the Liberal leader said that he favours a mandatory expansion of the CPP, of the type that Kathleen Wynne put forward in Ontario. That's a $1,000 pay cut, Mr. Speaker, for every single Ontario worker, indeed every single Canadian, earning $60,000 a year. That's just from their own pockets, Mr. Speaker, not additional to their employer. Families in York Region did not ask for that. Indeed, Canadians did not ask for that. And they don't want it, and they will never accept it. Under this Conservative government, Mr. Speaker, Canadians can count on more money in their pockets at the end of the day. Thank you.
The honourable member for Trinity Spadina.
Mr. Speaker, nowhere has this government's failure in housing become more obvious than in the province of Manitoba. And while this is bad enough, it's even worse because the junior minister responsible for housing comes from Manitoba. You'd think she'd pay attention to the problems in her own province. She doesn't. In Manitoba, housing for First Nations is critical, yet a $300 million fund to produce housing has created just 99 houses. If all this government can show is $3 million per home, it's not indifference that's the problem, it's incompetence. As she and her government failed to build housing in communities across Canada, particularly in rural Canada, pressures build in big cities. But in Winnipeg, shabby hotels are now being used to house homeless young people. These places are as dangerous as they are dismal. The minister's response? Nothing. The only real thing on housing the Conservative government is doing is pulling subsidies. And on this file, the government is hurting seniors in Manitoba. As mortgages expire, so too do low-income subsidies for Manitobans on fixed incomes. No wonder the junior minister and her senior minister missed a major housing conference in Winnipeg in her own province. They are missing in action and...
Order. Order. The honourable member for Saskatoon-Winisquin.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians don't want the most recent tax increase proposed by the leader of the Liberal Party, $1,000 of extra payroll tax for every employee who earns just $60,000 a year. out of their own pockets, Mr. Speaker. My constituents, Saskatoonians, Canadians, all Canadians, want more money in their pockets, not less money. The small business that employs that worker would also have to pay the equivalent amount of extra payroll tax, which would kill jobs, Mr. Speaker. We will vigorously oppose the Liberal leader's proposed tax increase punishing workers. We will strenuously oppose on behalf of all Canadians.
The honourable member for Ottawa Centre.
Mr. Speaker, here's a story that has played out many times around the world. The Cabinet takes over prime real estate to build their leader's legacy project in the capital. They choose a massive, imposing design. The plan creates local discontent. It gets a failing grade on cost and especially location. Architects, mayor and council, and even the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court join the chorus of voices opposed to the plan. The public is opposed to it. Even the government's own partisans start asking for change. But still, ministers gleefully promise to ride roughshod over everyone because nothing trumps their leader's vanity. Mr. Speaker, I'm not describing a communist dictatorship in its final days. This is a story of Canada's own commie-cons. The irony of it was funny for a while, but enough is enough. The government's disregard of democratic voices is a slap in the face of the freedom fighters who are supposed to be honoured by this memorial. Mr. Speaker, tear down this monumental failure.
The honourable member for St. Catharines.
Mr. Speaker, our Conservative government disagrees with the statement of the Liberal leader who said, and I quote, he supports a mandatory expansion of the CPP of the type that Kathleen Wynne put forward in Ontario, end of quote. That plan would raise taxes by thousands of dollars on every worker and family earning $60,000 a year. Mr. Speaker, we reject that. Our approach is a low-tax plan for a secure retirement. We've heard the Liberal leader tell us right here in the House of Commons, Mr. Speaker, that he and his family are not part of the middle class. Mr. Speaker, my parents and their family are part of the middle class, along with millions of families across this country. The Liberal leader is intent on taking money from the middle class and paying for his programs. Mr. Speaker, in this party, in this government, we've lowered taxes to ensure that millions of families across this country enjoy the money that they've earned and deserve and spend it the way they believe it should be spent.
Oral questions. Question orale. The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have been shocked by the lack of action in Canada on defective Takata airbags. Already we've seen 6 people killed and over 100 injured. The Americans issued a recall last week. Over 1 million Canadian vehicles have the same airbags, yet this government only issued a recall notice yesterday. And Transport Canada still doesn't even have mandatory recall powers. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the safety of Canadian drivers, why is Canada lagging behind the rest of the world?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, the safety and security of Canadians is a top priority. In 2014, we passed measures to strengthen Canada's recall system, measures which the member opposite and his party opposed. Right. And in Budget 2015, we've committed to strengthening even further our recall system to give us the power to order recalls and levy monetary penalties. I expect the member will support that. To this point, Transport Canada has received no complaints related to this issue from Canadians and is not aware of any incidents having taken place in Canada. Good.
The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What exactly is the government waiting for? Bodies to pile up before they take action? Mr. Speaker, Canadians are waking up today to more bad economic news. Just 2 months after the Conservative budget projected first quarter GDP growth of 1.2%, our economy actually shrank. Conservative mismanagement has meant more people out of work, more families struggling with household debt, and now an economy that is shrinking instead of growing. Will Conservatives finally admit their approach is not working and present a real plan to create jobs and kickstart our economy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, since coming to office, our government has had one of the best job creation records in the G7, and we are leading in economic growth. While we're focused on creating jobs, the Liberals are pushing a high-tax, high-debt agenda that will threaten jobs and set working families back. Their leader even said, and I quote, we're looking at an expansion and a mandatory expansion of the CPP of the type that Kathleen Wynne put forward in Ontario, end of quote. That means for someone earning $60,000, that's an extra $1,000 in tax that they will have to pay each year.
The honourable member for Hamilton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, a little less bragging and a little more action is what Canadians are looking for. It's no wonder Conservatives are failing on the economy. The Finance Minister thinks the answer to our shrinking economy is to weaken labour protections and make it easier to fire workers. The Prime Minister claimed he was just talking about Greece, but the Minister's office said, no, he's talking about France. But mixed-up Conservative excuses aren't fooling anyone, Mr. Speaker. When will Conservatives stop using a tax on workers and their rights as a smokescreen for their economic mismanagement?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister said no such thing. He was talking about the situation in European countries like Greece and France, where their Liberal policies have resulted in out-of-control deficits and out-of-control spending. As a result, there have been tax hikes, massive layoffs, and cuts in services. The same thing that the Liberal government did in the 1990s because of its own financial mismanagement. In contrast, our government has balanced the budget while giving benefits directly to families and reducing taxes on the middle class. But the Liberals and the NDP want to take those benefits away and raise taxes on the middle class.
The honourable member for Saint-Lambert. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are making a bad habit of attacking the middle class at international fora. At Davos in 2012, the Prime Minister announced that Canadians will have to work an extra 2 years before retiring. Wednesday, at the G7, the Minister of Finance announced that it should be easier for employers to lay off workers to create jobs. That's ridiculous. Do the Conservatives not understand that if you want a strong economy, you have to create jobs for the middle class?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister said no such thing. As I said, he was talking about the situation in European countries like Greece and France. But, Mr. Speaker, let me tell you what we're doing here in Canada. While we're letting middle-class Canadians choose how they want to spend and save their money, the Liberals and the NDP want to raise payroll taxes. The Liberal leader announced that he would dramatically hike payroll taxes on the middle-class Canadians. He even said, and I quote, "We're looking at an expansion, a mandatory expansion of the CPP of the type that Kathleen Wynne put forward in Ontario," end of quote. For someone earning $60,000, that means an extra $1,000 in taxes that they will have to pay each year.
The honourable member for Saint-Lambert. The Conservatives have only themselves to blame for the ailing middle class. StatsCan has confirmed that unbalanced Conservative policies are hurting job creation and the economy. Our GDP contracted by 0.6% in the first 3 months of 2015. Canadians are working harder and harder, but having a hard time making ends meet under the Conservatives. Will the government get its priorities straight and create jobs for the middle class instead of musing about laying them off?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, this is further indication of global economic uncertainty and how it's affecting Canada, which is why we must continue with our low-tax plan for jobs and growth, a plan that is working. Since the depths of the recession, over 1.2 million net new jobs have been created. These are overwhelmingly full-time private sector jobs in high-wage industries. However, the Liberal leaders' proposed dramatic payroll tax would kill jobs in Canada. In fact, the CFIB survey of employers in Ontario said that 69% would have to freeze or cut salaries, and 53% would have to lay off workers if this were to happen.
The honourable member for Markham, Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister should know that the Reuters reporter himself confirmed that the Finance Minister's comments were not related to Greece.
We learned this morning that the Canadian economy shrank in the first fiscal quarter of this year. The Minister of Finance is in Europe, explaining that you have to cut jobs to grow the economy. Simple question, how many jobs does the minister think we need to cut to grow the economy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, the Finance Minister said no such thing. The GDP numbers is a further indication of global economic uncertainty, which is why we must continue with our low-tax plan for jobs and growth, a plan that is working. The Bank of Canada, the OECD, and the IMF are all projecting another year of economic growth in Canada. However, the Liberals' leader is proposing a dramatic payroll tax hike that would kill jobs in Canada. As I mentioned, the CFIB survey of employers in Ontario said that 69% would have to freeze or cut salaries, and 53% would have to terminate jobs to cope with the added costs of an increase in the CPP.
The honourable member for Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, while the finance minister lectures G7 countries on how to get economic growth by firing people, GDP figures here at home destroy his credibility. Under this government, Canada's economy shrank in March. It also shrank in February and in January and last November and last August. Joblessness is up 200,000 more than before the recession. Business investment is down, exports are down. We've suffered 51 months of trade deficits. The government's plan is producing no growth and no jobs, so why don't they change it?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our Conservative government is focused on what matters to Canadians, helping families make ends meet by lowering taxes and protecting and creating jobs. Since coming to office, our government has had one of the best job creation records in the G7, and we're leading in economic growth. While we're focused on creating jobs, the Liberal leader's only solution is raising taxes. But don't take my word for it. Here's what he said. And I quote, "We're looking at an expansion and a mandatory expansion of the CPP of the type that the Kathleen Wynne would put forward in Ontario." End of quote. That means for someone earning $60,000, it's an extra $1,000 in taxes every year that they would have to pay under their scheme.
The honourable member for Wascana.
Well, the HoC job plan didn't work. In a chronically weak economy, retirement security is a big middle-class issue. Under this government, 3/4 of those working in the private sector do not have a company pension. The average 35-year-old is saving less than half of what their parents did. And of those in their 50s, only a third have saved $100,000 or more. Another third, especially in the middle class, have no retirement savings at all. All the government's gimmicks have failed. So why don't they work constructively with the provinces on a real plan?
The honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, it's our Conservative government that has fought for seniors. We've increased the GIS by the largest amount in a quarter century. They voted against it. We've introduced pension income splitting for seniors. They voted against it. Economic Action Plan 2015 introduces even more support for seniors, such as a new home accessibility tax credit, more compassionate care benefits, and lower required RIF withdrawals. They want to raise taxes on seniors. We're putting money back in the pockets of Canadian seniors.
The honourable member for Churchill.
Mr. Speaker, the Nissachawasset Cree Nation in northern Manitoba has been waiting 12 years for the approval of their treaty land entitlement. The minister has given no reason for the delay, which is costing the First Nation millions of dollars, money that could be spent to improve the lives of their people. They are among 15 First Nations in Manitoba who are simply waiting for a signature from the minister. When will the minister sign the ministerial order for the Nissachawasset Cree Nation?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And of course, we take the matter of addition to reserve and TLE lands very seriously, and as we do, improving economic conditions on reserve, and that's why we have continued to invest in on-reserve infrastructure. We've continued to invest in communities across the country. Every time we do, Mr. Speaker, the NDP votes against it. It would be nice to have them on side for once.
The honourable member for Churchill.
Mr. Speaker, for thousands of residential school survivors, next week's report marks the beginning of reconciliation, not the end. As former AFN National Chief Phil Fontaine said, the Prime Minister's 2008 apology will be meaningless unless he takes action following the Commission's report. Will the Prime Minister show that he is prepared to act in good faith by attending the final event of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission next week?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, of course the government will be represented at all TRC events, and our government remains committed to a fair and lasting resolution to the legacy of Indian residential schools, as acknowledged in the Prime Minister's historic apology on behalf of all Canadians in 2008. There's no place in Canada for the attitudes that inspired the Indian residential school system to ever prevail again. While the TRC is closing, the work to heal the relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians needs to continue, and our government will continue to fulfill its obligations as set out in the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement.
Member for Churchill.
Mr. Speaker, our question was about the Prime Minister. This is a national historic event, and we want to hear that the Prime Minister will be in attendance. And as for looking forward, reconciliation means not just saying sorry, but changing your behavior. 20 years after the last residential school closed, First Nations children receive less funding for education than other Canadian children. They receive less funding for health and for social services. And Mr. Speaker, more children now are in state care than at the height of the residential schools. We can't promise reconciliation and continue to treat First Nations as second-class citizens. What is the government's plan to make their apology real?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister made a historic apology on behalf of all Canadians in 2008, the government recognized that the Indian residential schools caused great harm and had no place in Canada. While we cannot undo the past, we can learn from it, and we have taken the steps necessary to bring in closure to the legacy of the Indian residential schools. We will continue to promote reconciliation between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians.
The honourable member from Manicouagan. The Conservatives' disastrous record speaks for itself, Mr. Speaker. To name just a few examples, we have the Conservatives' refusal to adequately fund education for Aboriginal youth, their refusal to hold a national public inquiry into the 1,200 missing and murdered Indigenous women, and finally, their completely ineffective housing program. And yet, the Prime Minister personally committed to reconciliation in 2008. So, was the official apology for Indian residential schools nothing more than hot air?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, it was our Prime Minister and this government that, after decades of waiting, delivered that historic apology on behalf of all Canadians. It was this Prime Minister that did that. Speaking of shoddy records, Mr. Speaker, the opposition has a lot to answer for, because every time that we invest on reserve, if we try to give matrimonial property rights to women on reserve, we try to bring up wastewater and water standards on reserve, they're always there to oppose us, Mr. Speaker. Why don't they get on board as we work with First Nations to improve conditions on reserve?
Hear, hear.
The honourable member for Abitibi, Bay James, Nunavik, EU. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a question of respect, of never forgetting all the children who never returned home. My colleagues, my leader, and I will be present at the closing ceremonies of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that begin on Sunday, to listen to the words of survivors and to hear the Commission's conclusions. So my question is very simple. Will the Prime Minister make the first gesture of reconciliation? Will the Prime Minister be there?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister did make the first gesture of reconciliation on the floor of this House of Commons with his apology to residential school survivors in 2008. We continue to work with First Nations across the country, and we will continue to be committed to a fair and lasting resolution to the legacy of Indian residential schools. Mr. Speaker, it was this Prime Minister and this government that took that step. We remain committed to that work.
The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Not only is the Conservative government muzzling scientists across the country, but it's also imposing useless rules that paralyze research. And that's the case at a research centre in Toronto, which has had illogical conditions forced upon it before it can receive new funding. This is endangering scientists' careers, their ongoing work, and even Canada's scientific reputation. Will the minister fix this absurd situation immediately?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry.
Mr. Speaker, Canadian federal departments and agencies produce over 4,000 science publications per year. Our Economic Action Plan 2015 is positioning Canadian science to push the boundaries of knowledge, create jobs, and improve the quality of life of Canadians. In fact, since 2006, we've provided more than $13 billion toward research, development, innovation, infrastructure, and Canadian talent, including $1.5 billion in Economic Action Plan 2015 alone. We only hope that the opposition parties would just once support us in those endeavours.
Member for Burnaby Douglas.
Mr. Speaker, Conservative muzzling and reckless cuts to science are damaging Canada's research capacity. The Conservatives have cut $1 billion science dollars and fired 4,000 federal scientists since coming to power, and now a ridiculous federal funding condition requiring old grants to expire before scientists can access new funding is sapping lab capacity and threatening more jobs, which is precisely what is happening right now at the Lundenfeld Tannenbaum Research Institute in Toronto. Will the minister immediately put an end to this unnecessary rule?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry.
Mr. Speaker, our record on science is unparalleled in this country's history. We've increased funding to the grounding councils by $5.4 billion, including $1.5 billion for the Canada First Research Excellence Fund, $3 billion in cumulative increases to the grounding councils, and nearly $900 million in funding increases for the Research Support Fund. Mr. Speaker, again, I ask the opposition parties to just once support us in these endeavours.
The honourable member for York South Weston.
Mr. Speaker, Conservative mismanagement has also made a mess of the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program. Ontario is warning that the program rollout has been so rushed and the funding allocation so politically motivated that the province won't be able to participate in the program or match funds. The $150 million fund was announced on May 15th, and the deadline for projects is June 9th, 3 weeks. Ridiculous! Why are Conservatives playing politics with the infrastructure funding that our communities so badly need?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Communities and Infrastructure.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that question is ridiculous. Our Conservative government is very proud to have established the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Plan. Had that member and had the provincial government in Ontario read our budget, they would have known that this program was coming. We are very proud to have the opportunity to celebrate not only the 150th birthday of our country, but to preserve and to promote recreational infrastructure facilities in communities across Ontario and throughout the country, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Quebec. A nice little check here and another there. Mr. Speaker, it's just little gifts once again. That's how the Conservatives are now funding infrastructure in Quebec for Canada's sesquicentennial. Millions of dollars will be handed out without any collaboration or cooperation, and the deadline of June 26th doesn't give any time to really build any good big projects. And yet, we've known for a few years that the 150th anniversary was going to be coming in 2017. This government's been in power for 9 years now, so Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to understand, why are they making it up on the go? Is it incompetence? What's going on?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I know I speak on behalf of all members on this side of the House when I say we always appreciate the dramatic flair with which that member asks her questions. Mr. Speaker, the Canada 150 Infrastructure Program will help to preserve and improve treasured cultural and community locations, allowing Canadians and their families to enjoy moments of sport and recreation for many years to come.
The honourable member for Saint-Laurent-Cartierville. Mr. Speaker, this 150th anniversary of the of Canada, well, it's been coming for a while now. For over a year, we've been asking the Minister of Heritage for a plan to celebrate. Instead, the government has dropped a disparate, disorganized Canada 150 program with such tight deadlines that neither Quebec municipalities nor the province of Ontario will be able to participate. Will the Conservatives admit that this pre-election blitz is just designed to let them hand out gifts before the election?
Parliamentary Secretary to Minister for Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, we are seeing significant interest and demand from communities, from municipalities and not-for-profit organizations in our Canada 150 infrastructure program in communities across Quebec and across Canada, Mr. Speaker. And under the leadership of this Prime Minister, Canada has led all G7 countries with respect to investments in infrastructure as a percentage of GDP. Under the Liberals, Mr. Speaker, they didn't get it done.
Zero. Honourable member for Trinity, Spadina.
Mr. Speaker, the celebration of the 100th anniversary of Confederation is supposed to bring Canadians together in a happy way. Instead, this government has confused provinces and angered municipalities. As an infrastructure fund that was announced has different rules for different regions, different criteria for different provinces, and different rules for different municipalities, and there is no funding formula. The province of Ontario is furious. They were never consulted. The provincial minister in charge of infrastructure has said that this is just a public relations exercise, a glorified gazebo fund. Will the government finally admit that this is actually a slush fund for Conservative MPs who are facing defeat in this fall's election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Communities and Infrastructure.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's really rich coming from that member. For months, that member has been standing in his place, claiming that this government has not been moving quickly enough with respect to our infrastructure programs. And today, apparently, we're moving too quickly. There appears to be significant confusion over on that side. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, had that member and his provincial friend read our budget, they would have known that the Canada 150 infrastructure program was coming. We look forward to delivering on our commitment to support communities in Ontario and across the country.
Member for Trinity, Spadina.
Mr. Speaker, I was asking for an infrastructure program. This is a joke. Canada's celebration and Confederation does not belong to the Conservative Party. The funds that were announced just a few days ago have a deadline to apply in just a few days from now. I couldn't find that in the budget, nor could I find a dollar amount. What's worse is that the member for Chatham, Kent, and Essex says that what you do is you apply to his office for help. You don't apply to the government's offices. You don't apply to City Hall. That's disgraceful. What sort of an inside track is being discussed here? Why is this not just simply pork barreling described as such? The Conservative government playing politics with Confederation. They're hurting cities in this country, and this fund is a disgrace.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our Conservative government's Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program will achieve two very important objectives. One, it will help all Canadians celebrate the 150th anniversary of our country's Confederation. Secondly, it will help communities across the country renovate, expand existing recreational infrastructure. If that member wishes to forgo both of that opportunities, that is his prerogative.
Honourable member for St. John's East.
Speaker, as NATO considers whether to establish a permanent presence in the Baltics to counter Russian threats, the Minister of National Defence has already mused that Canada may be ready to send troops there. Now, the Minister didn't do that here in this House, just like he didn't bring the deployment of military trainers to Ukraine to Parliament either. Does the Minister really believe that consulting Parliament on military deployments, as his party promised to do, means discussing these requests here first?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member is quite right. It's this government that, for the first time, brought forward the responsibility to consult Parliament with respect to military deployments, Mr. Speaker, and we've done that on a number of occasions. And, of course, we're very proud of the work that the Canadian Armed Forces is doing both at home and abroad, including in the Ukraine and in the Baltic states, Mr. Speaker. We're very proud of the role that the Royal Canadian Air Force is doing in the Baltic states, and of course we've been on the forefront of providing assistance to the Ukraine, Mr. Speaker, and we'll continue to do that. Thank you.
The honourable member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Canada should definitely consider deployment requests, but here in the House is where those discussions should take place. We expected more from the Defence Minister, who keeps on racking up faux pas. After his inaccurate claims that Canada was the only country with smart bombs and tweets with misleading photos, the minister's incompetence knows no bounds. Will he at least have the decency to debate all potential military deployments here in the House?
To the Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we've done just that. When serious deployments have been considered, this government has done so. Of course, we had a great debate with respect to the deployment of Canadian forces in the fight against the jihadist terrorist regime ISIL, Mr. Speaker. We know that both opposition parties voted against that deployment, Mr. Speaker. We know that when it comes to protecting Canadians at home and abroad, Canadian interests at home and abroad, the opposition will consistently vote against that. That's why they voted against the increases that we've had to military funding, Mr. Speaker. That's why they voted against the expansion and the new equipment that we've bought for the Canadian Armed Forces. Canadians understand that when it comes to providing assistance and security, that it's this government that they can rely upon.
The honourable member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Let's talk about another equally mismanaged file. The F-35s, the helicopters, the close combat vehicles. Every time the Conservative mismanagement has reached new depths. The delays, the inadequacies, and now we learn that the temporary fleet of supply ships won't be ready before 2020. Does the government really think that striking a new committee is going to fix the problem? The Honourable Minister.
Her questions all wrong. She has her facts all wrong. In fact, we have been living up to our commitment to provide our men and women in uniform with the equipment that they need to do the job we asked of them. In fact, we've delivered the new Globemasters, 5 of them, the C-17s, tactical lift transporters, main battle tanks, labs, new heavy artillery. We've been doing the refit and modernization of the Halifax frigate class. Mr. Speaker, we're also expecting next month to take delivery of the Cyclones, the new helicopters that will allow us to finally start retiring the Sea Kings. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, the one thing that is consistent is that member and her party voted against every one of these acquisitions.
The honourable member for Louis-Hébert. Mr. Speaker, the disastrous management by the Conservatives of military procurement has significant impacts on our Navy. It'll take years before new ships are ready. Davie Shipyard made a proposal to meet our needs in the short term, but the offer remains in limbo, and now the government says it needs even more time. Can the government explain this added delay, which puts hundreds of jobs in jeopardy and our country in a bad light?
Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, we are proceeding to deal with the Halifax class. We're working on all coastlines in Vancouver. We're having icebreakers built.
Still later this year on the new AOPS. Mr. Speaker, we're supporting our men and women in uniform by providing the equipment they need in a responsible way to taxpayers. But, Mr. Speaker, I have to point out the honourable member and his party have voted against every one of these initiatives.
The honourable member for Oxford.
Mr. Speaker, members of my riding of Oxford are concerned with foreign criminals abusing the generosity of Canadians, and they want to be assured that action is being taken to address profiteers. Can the Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Public Safety update this House on what is being done to ensure the integrity of Canada's immigration regime is protected?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
To thank the honourable member from Oxford for that question. I would also like to commend CBSA, the Canada Border Services Agency, on arresting 2 more individuals who were on their wanted by the CBSA list. To date, as a result of the Wanted by the CBSA program, Canadians have assisted in locating 62 individuals in Canada, of which 53 have been removed. Additionally, 18 other individuals have been located abroad. Mr. Speaker, these are concrete and real results. Canadians know they can count on our Conservative government to ensure their generosity is not abused by foreign criminals.
The honourable member for Rimouski. Mr. Speaker, thousands of our top French-speaking researchers are meeting in Rimouski. It's the last day of the 83rd annual convention of ACFAS. The president is concerned that the Conservatives are gutting research and gagging federal scientists, muzzling them. She says that the Conservative government's approach is not enlightened. It's sad and dangerous for the consequences of scientific progress in the long run. When will the Conservatives finally recognize the tremendous contribution of our scientists and researchers?
I wish the honourable member would actually support some of the measures that we've taken to support world-leading research in this country. Here's a quote from the President and CEO of the Canadian Foundation for Innovation about this year's budget. This is the largest single investment ever made to support research infrastructure in Canada. With this new funding, Canadian universities, colleges, and research hospitals will be able to continue to undertake globally competitive research that is essential to the health, prosperity, and quality of life of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I want to know why the honourable member voted against that.
Yeah, why did he?
The honourable member for Chambly-Bordua. Mr. Speaker, 8 municipalities in my riding of Chambly-Bordua have passed resolutions calling for a moratorium on the installation of community mailboxes. The municipalities have had enough of this government making decisions without even consulting them. And the minister who said he would make inquiries of Canada Post, that's clearly not enough. Will the government finally listen to the municipalities of Chambly-Bordua and call on Canada Post to put a moratorium on the installation of new mailboxes?
Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, in 2014, Canada Post delivered 1.4 billion fewer pieces of letter mail than in 2006. They cannot continue delivering door-to-door. They have to balance their books without being an undue burden on Canadian taxpayers. Meanwhile, the NDP's plan would cost taxpayers $500 million a year, which means that the NDP would increase the burden on taxpayers' shoulder. That's not what we're going to do. Instead, we're going to keep taxes low, create jobs, and put money back in the pockets of Canadian workers. The honourable member for Alfred Pellant. Mr. Speaker, clearly, this government is not listening to municipal politicians and residents. Ending door-to-door delivery directly concerns the municipalities, but the Conservatives don't think it's important to consult them. The city of Laval now has to go to court to be heard. Will the government finally show some respect to municipal politicians and agree to meet with them to discuss this?
Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, as the member knows, that Canada Post has delivered 1.4 billion fewer letters in 2014 than it did in 2016. It has a 5-point plan to address that, which includes consultations, Mr. Speaker, with those who would be affected in postal delivery. The member well knows that. What the member also should be clear about, though, is that Canada Post needs to continue with its 5-point plan. Last year, it did not make a $1.3 billion special payment to make up for its unfunded pension liabilities, Mr. Speaker. The estimated payment this year as well would be $1.4 billion. That's in Canada Post's report on page 68. The member should allow Canada Post to get on with its structural changes, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Terrebonne-Blainville. For months, the Conservatives have been reheating the same old lines on Canada Post. Maybe they should change strategy. Over 600 municipalities in Terrebonne, including Terrebonne, have expressed their discontent. The NDP is listening to the residents and municipal politicians and has understood that this is not a luxury. Door-to-door delivery is more of an essential service. Instead of spending thousands of dollars on litigation, why doesn't the government just agree to a moratorium? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the member is fighting for a plan for only 1/3 of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, she knows that 2/3 of Canadians currently don't receive door-to-door delivery. I point her to page 68 of Canada Post's annual report in 2014, and allow me to quote, "Without pension relief, the corporation would have been required to make special payments of approximately $1.3 billion in 2014. The special payments without pension relief would amount to $1.4 billion in 2015. And Mr. Speaker, those payments would have to be made in subsequent years as well. Canada Post needs to continue with its 5-point plan.
Honourable member for Scarborough-Guildwood.
Mr. Speaker, after much humming and hawing, we finally got the Minister of the Environment to commit to her new target of 524 megatons by 2030. Having done nothing for the last 10 years, we're now asked to believe that an additional 200 megatons will be achieved in 15 years without a plan. What are her commitments from the provinces in writing? What are her commitments from the industrial sectors in writing? How will she offset the projected 180 megatons from the oil sands? Mr. Speaker, this target looks more deceptive and delusional rather than fair and ambitious.
Hear, hear. Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, our government has announced a fair and ambitious target for Canada that is in line with the international industrialized countries. We plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30% below 2005 levels by 2030, which is a reduction of 225 megatons, and will continue to take a responsible and balanced approach. Building on this, we will reduce methane emissions from the oil and gas sector, regulate the production of chemical and nitrogen fertilizers, and reduce emissions from natural gas-fired electricity generations. And we will do this without forcing a job-killing carbon tax. Thank you, Mr.
Speaker. The honourable member for Ottawa-Vanier. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I gave the Citizenship and Immigration Minister a letter about a woman who was deported yesterday to Burundi. She's currently in Addis Ababa. How can the government, on the one hand, ask Canadians to leave Burundi immediately? How can the government justify deporting someone there? Will this person be allowed to come back to Canada to be in safety? And will we at least temporarily suspend deportations to that country?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Immigration and Citizenship.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member knows very well that these decisions are made by highly qualified officials after extensive review of every individual's file. I believe if the member feels strongly about this, he can speak to me for further details after question period. Thank you.
The honourable member for Pontiac. It's all well and good for the Conservatives to announce money to connect regional regions to high-speed internet, but many areas in my riding are not able to get that. In Chelsea Park, there are many places that still have problems connecting, and there are no available solutions. We're not talking about the Arctic, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about a municipality that's less than 15 kilometers from the Prime Minister's office. Clearly, their plan isn't working. What is the government going to do to connect people in Chelsea? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the opportunity to answer this question. Of course, last week the Minister was pleased to announce that our government has exceeded the targets of the Connecting Canadians program. The Connecting Canadians program will connect over 70,000 more households to affordable high-speed internet for a total of 357,000 homes. We have achieved this goal with only 60% of the total Connecting Canadians budget. For Canadians in rural and northern regions, access to high-speed internet will unlock tremendous economic potential, leading to the creation of new jobs, products, and businesses across Canada. Again, Mr. Speaker, I only wish the opposition parties would support initiatives like this.
The honourable member for Longueuil-Pierre Boucher. Further job losses add to the long list of Conservative failures on the economy. In Longueuil, the Provigo store is the most recent victim. The community will lose not only 80 jobs, but all the organizations who benefited from the generous support of the owner, André Tremblay. Will the Conservatives, because we're buying more and more from Walmart and stuff, cheaper, lower quality, but lower prices too, I guess. Will the Conservatives finally admit that their economic policy has had serious consequences for communities like Longueuil?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, we sympathize with those Canadians who have lost their jobs. Our Conservative government is focused on what matters to Canadians, jobs and economic growth. Nevertheless, Canada's overall job growth record since the depths of the global recession is among the best in the G7 countries, with over 1.2 million net new jobs created, overwhelmingly full-time, high-wage and private sector jobs. As we've always said, Canada is not immune to the global economic challenges beyond our borders. We will continue to reject the Liberal and NDP policy to hike payroll taxes dramatically, and also the NDP's risky high tax and debt schemes that would kill jobs and hurt the Canadian economy.
Member for Okanagan-Shuswap.
Mr. Speaker, constituents from my riding of Okanagan-Shuswap are very pleased with our measures to help Canadian middle-class families. Can the Minister of State for Social Development update this House on the impact the universal child care benefit is having on families from coast to coast to coast?
The Honourable Minister of State.
I'd like to thank that member
member for that great question and the great work that he has done for his constituents over the years. Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to be in Pickering over the last week and met with families to tell them about the expanded universal child care benefit and the increased universal child care benefit. I met with Melanie. Melanie is a single mom and she has a 5-year-old son, soon to be turning 6. She was thrilled when I told her that our plan would increase and expand the benefit, the universal child care benefit for her, because she counts on that support. I also told her that the Liberal plan would be to completely end the universal child care benefit, and the NDP plan wouldn't help her at all because she's not using licensed daycare. Mr. Speaker, our plan helps all families with children regardless of how they choose to look after their children. Melanie was very happy to hear that.
The honourable member for Saint-Maurice-Champlain. Mr. Speaker, an unprecedented crisis in Canada is affecting thousands of people whose houses are affected by pyrite. Once again, the federal government is not responding to calls for help from the Morrissey region. How does the government plan to limit the effects of this property disaster in a region that's already reeling from thousands of job losses in natural resource-based industries?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Industry.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this member knows well that the pyrite issue falls under provincial jurisdiction. In fact, the Government of Quebec launched a provincial program to provide financial assistance for homeowners dealing with pyrite damage in August 2011. Mr. Speaker, I would urge those concerned to contact the Société d'Habitation du Québec.
The Honourable Member for Prince George Peace River.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government's 2015 budget is focused on what matters to Canadians: creating jobs, lowering taxes, and providing benefits directly to families. But the leader of the Liberal Party wants to dramatically hike payroll taxes on the middle class. Can the Minister of Environment explain to the House what our budget will do for our North?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague from Prince George Peace River for that great question. Unlike previous governments that made cuts on the backs of the territories, our government is providing record-high transfer payments to the territories in healthcare, education, and social programs. We are investing in northern infrastructure, housing, tourism, and the economy, and we are also supporting meteorological and navigational warning services and enhancing safety of marine transportation in the Arctic. We're also securing a new market access for Canadian CO products. The Liberals and the NDP would eliminate the child care benefit program and raise the cost of living in the North with a carbon tax. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Verchères-les-Patriotes. Mr. Speaker, I discovered that adopted people in my riding with permanent residency who were told they would get citizenship have already voted. When they applied for a passport, they found out they weren't Canadian yet. They had no proof of citizenship when they voted. All they needed was to say that they were citizens. Is the government aware of the number of people on the voters list who shouldn't be? And will this government tighten up procedures so that people don't simply have to answer a question yes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. No, the Honourable Government. Okay. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, the rules are very clear and very specific. People have an opportunity to apply for the permanent residence cards through our Canadian immigration streams. We have many economic streams, family unification streams, humanitarian streams. Once they apply for their permanent residency card and they adhere to the rules and the time period of staying in the country for the period of time that they're expected to stay here, they can apply for their Canadian citizenship.
The honourable member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, after years of negotiations among lawyers, doctors, and Health Canada officials, thalidomide victims finally got an acceptable offer. The lump sum of $250,000 seemed a fair compromise, but for unknown reasons, the government's final offer was only $125,000. There's nothing to justify this arbitrary decision. By supplanting the informed and responsible parties to the negotiations, the government is doing great harm. Who in the Health Department took that decision? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we have made a very unprecedented settlement, and it really was a tragic event in the 1960s, which reminds us of how important drug safety is. But I think it's important to note that recently announced, just last week, there's going to be tax-free yearly payments based on need, and over 75% are going to receive $75,000 to $100,000 tax-free. And of course, there's also going to be an extraordinary medical assistance fund. So I think this is going to be important support that will allow the victims of this crisis to live their life with dignity.
The honourable member for Saint-Léonard Saint-Michel. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Small and Medium-Sized Businesses, or SMEs, is delighted with tariff cuts to customs duties on baby clothing and sports equipment in 2013 because these have been beneficial to small business and consumers. In these areas, prices have dropped virtually across the board, and yet a lot of promises have been made, but no new initiative has materialized. Can the minister assure us that prices will keep dropping, and when can SMEs and Canadians expect to see further tariff cuts?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, our government has undertaken a number of initiatives to reduce taxes, and of course the ones that are being referenced are ones that are part of a number of things we've done to help families by reducing taxes. In particular, you spoke about, of course, the sports equipment, where we did reduce tariffs, where we didn't have Canadians manufacturing in that field. More importantly for Canadians are the fact that we have, in the most recent budget, doubled the sports and fitness tax credit, which we originally introduced. Again, another thing that is helping families get by, keep their children involved and active in sporting activities. This is an example of how our government is taking action to help families.
The honourable member for Saint-Léonard Saint-Michel. In Budget 2015, the Finance Minister announced no further tariff cuts. And yet the former Finance Minister, Mr. Flaherty, was determined to reduce the price gap between Canada and the U.S. with things like reductions to customs duties. Previous tariff cuts had paved the way for considerable price drops for consumers, but there are still some tariffs as high as 18%. The test was conclusive, so why hasn't the Finance Minister gone ahead with further tariff cuts in Budget 2015?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, our government has cut literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tariff lines. Partly we've done it, of course, as part of our process of entering into free trade agreements at an unprecedented level compared with any other government in Canadian history, but we've also done it through the implementation of our new policy of allowing inputs into the manufacturing process in Canada to enter tariff-free. This helps reduce costs for manufacturing, helps reduce the cost of our manufacturing products in Canada. This has been a significant advance for us. It's resulted in massive reductions in tariffs. This is all good news for Canadians, for Canadian consumers, for Canadian businesses, for creating Canadian jobs.
This brings question period to a close.
Tabling of documents. Dépôt de documents. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, I know that on a regular basis, a member from Ottawa Centre and other members make certainly question or call in regard to the location of the Communist Monument. I would like, with unanimous consent, to actually enter into the record, Mr. Speaker, the map and diagram which shows the exact location of the monument when it will happen. Just ask for unanimous consent to be able to do that for the record, Mr. Speaker.
Does the member have unanimous consent to table this? He obviously does not have unanimous consent. Routine proceedings. Tabling of documents. Dépôt de documents. Introduction of government bills. Déclaration de...
Statements by